This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Stirling Soap Company. Christmas will be here before you know it, and you know what would make a great stocking stuffer for everybody in your family? Stirling Soap. From bar soap to shave soap, beard balm to lip balm, aftershaves and lotions, Stirling Soap has something for everyone on your list. Check out their seasonal soaps that will complement the scents of your home this holiday season. And they're more than just soap. They also have a full line of coffee straight from the Stirling Roastery. Find their full line of products at stirlingsoapcompany.com. It's December 9th, and on this day in 1934, it was the sneakers game. Abe Cohen stood 5 feet tall and weighed 140 pounds. He wasn't muscular. He didn't look like a football player. And in fact, he was not. But Abe Cohen may have been the most important person for the New York Football Giants on this day. It was the 1934 NFL championship game between the Giants and the monsters of the Midway, the Chicago Bears. The temperature was barely in double digits. The tarp that covered the polo grounds was frozen to the turf underneath. It took a while to remove that tarp, and seeing the ground just confirmed what they already knew. It was an ice rink more than a football field. After the field was inspected by Giants coach Steve Owen, he let his players know that it was going to be tough treading out there, boys. With no soft ground to plunge a cleat into, it was going to be an early version of the Ice Capades rather than championship football. Giants captain Ray Flaherty was a Northwest guy, and he had played collegiately at Gonzaga. He remembered a similar situation during his college days when instead of spikes, the players wore sneakers, and things seemed to go pretty well that day for them. Now, in today's NFL, it would be no problem to switch out shoes. A team would have myriad choices to choose from. But back in 1934, it was not an easy thing to do. The team didn't have a cage full of sneakers. Trying to find some on a Sunday morning also presented a challenge. None of the sporting goods stores were open, and that's when the undersized Abe Cohen enters the story. Cohen was a tailor by trade, and he worked for Manhattan College and did some part-time work with the New York Giants. And part of his duties with Manhattan College and the New York Giants was to sew the athletic uniforms. And when he heard about the shoe idea, he piped up and said that he had a key to the Manhattan athletic supply closet. He could get his hands on some basketball high tops. So, off Cohen went. Traveling on a Sunday in New York City was also a bit different in 1934 than it is today. It took Cohen a while to come back to the Polo Grounds. In the interim, the game kicked off with everybody wearing football spikes. Now, it should be said that the Bears were the defending NFL champs, having beaten New York the year before. They were heavily favored in this game, having won all of their 13 games so far that year, and they had outscored their opponents 286-86. The bigger, stronger Bears beat up on the Giants in the first half. Starting Giants running back Ken Strong was knocked out of the game for a bit after being trucked by linebacker Link Lyman. The Bears led 10-3 at halftime, and that's when Abe Cohen returned to the Polo Grounds with 9 pairs of sneakers. Not all of the Giants were sold on this idea. Strong, who had recovered from his first-half knockout by this point, put the basketball shoes on, and when his teams saw how easily he was able to navigate the frozen surface in the second half, well, they became convinced, and they swapped out their spikes for sneakers too. Chicago Bears' George Halas was not happy. He seldom was. He started screaming, "This ain't basketball!" Well, he tossed in an expletive, but you get the point. He tried to convince the referees that wearing spikeless shoes was illegal and said the Giants should put their cleats back on. His pleas fell on deaf ears, so Halas then instructed his players to stomp on their opponent's feet. But his players had trouble getting close to the Giants, enough to even attempt to plant a cleat into a foot. The Bears kept slipping. The Giants kept running. But they were still trailing. The Bears had put another field goal on the board in the third quarter, and it was 13-3 Chicago. The game began to turn on a simple handoff to Strong. He was able to find some firm footing and cut and scissored his way for a 43-yard touchdown run. The Giants then stopped the Bears' Bronco Nagurski's fourth and short attempt to get the ball back, and then they went on a rampage. They scored touchdown after touchdown, putting up 27 points in the final 10 minutes to rout the champs 30-13. It was a shocking result. Giants fans stormed the field at the final gun and tore down one of the goalposts. In the New York American newspaper the following day, writer Lewis Burton wrote, "To the heroes of antiquity, the Greek who raced across the marathon plain, and to Paul Revere, add now the name of Abe Cohen." Sure, a bit of hyperbole, but on this day the diminutive Cohen stood on the shoulders of giants by coming through with as clutch a play as any drawn up in the snow on the frozen Polo Grounds turf that day. On this day in 1977, Kermit Washington punched Rudy Tomjanovich, nearly killing him during a game between the LA Lakers and the Houston Rockets. It was a moment that changed both men's lives in an instant. It was the first minute of the second half. A missed shot by the Lakers was rebounded by the Rockets, and John Lucas started a fast break the other way. Trailing the play was Houston's Kevin Coonert and LA's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Washington. At midcourt, Washington grabbed Coonert by the hip to slow him down. In return, Coonert elbowed Washington in the face. It seemed inadvertent at first, but when Washington turned around, half expecting an apology from Coonert, he got another shot to the face. At that point, a fight ensued between the two. Kareem jumped in and was attempting to pull Coonert away from the fight when Rudy Tomjanovich came running toward midcourt to help out his teammate. Seeing Tomjanovich out of the corner of his eye running at him, Washington planted and threw a punch, smashing Rudy T's nose. Tomjanovich crumpled to the floor, still conscious, but dazed, with his ears ringing and blood gushing from his face. Later, it was determined Tomjanovich's injury was similar to being thrown from a car going 50 miles per hour. The punch broke his nose, fractured his skull, damaged his teeth, and spinal fluid leaked from his brain. In the immediate aftermath, Tomjanovich had facial reconstruction surgery and did not play the rest of the season. Washington received a $10,000 fine and a 26-game suspension. He felt abandoned and alone when the Lakers traded him to Boston later that year. Loneliness, heckling, and threats accompanied him for the rest of his career as he bounced around the league to San Diego and then to Portland. He actually resurrected his career a little bit in Portland and was an All-Star in 1980. And then he was out of the league for 5 years before coming back to play 6 games with Golden State before retiring for good in 1988. He's rewatched the video clip a few times since, and he says that he does not recognize the guy throwing that punch. In a moment of self-reflection, Washington said, "Hollywood couldn't have made an uglier monster. I could sort of see myself in there, but it wasn't me." Tomjanovich returned the following season and he averaged 19 points a game, but he did have lingering effects from the punch, eventually retiring in 1981. A lawsuit between the two teams was settled out of court in 1979. Rudy T would return to the court, however, taking over as head coach of the Rockets in 1992, winning back-to-back NBA championships in 1994 and 1995. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. On this day in 2001, George O'Leary was hired as Notre Dame's new football coach. Bob Davie had been fired on December 2nd, following back-to-back losing seasons in South Bend. O'Leary was hired to do for the Irish what he'd done at Georgia Tech, turn around a program from bad to a good team again. After taking over as an interim for the Yellow Jackets in 1994, O'Leary pumped life back into a Georgia Tech program that had been a national champion as recently as 1990. His 1998 team went 10-2 and beat Georgia. In '99, he coached the Jackets to a win over Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. He was the National Coach of the Year in 2000, so hopes were high for a quick turnaround for the Irish. But questions began to arise very quickly. Started to arise pretty quickly. A reporter researching a biographical story about O'Leary called the University of New Hampshire for information about O'Leary's playing days there. Now, O'Leary's biography said he'd been a 3-year letterman on the football team at the University of New Hampshire. The school informed the reporter that O'Leary had been on the team for just 1 season and he'd never played a game there. O'Leary offered to resign after that inaccuracy came to light, but Notre Dame's athletic director refused. But there was more to come. O'Leary had also listed he'd received a master's in education from NYU Stony Brook, a university that technically does not exist. O'Leary confessed he'd only taken a few classes at Stony Brook University and had not received his master's degree. Having already met with Notre Dame players and talking to them about honesty and loyalty, the lies in O'Leary's bio were contradictory to what he professed, and at that point, Notre Dame demanded his resignation, and an embarrassed O'Leary issued a mea culpa. He said he padded his resume from the beginning with inaccuracies, and he just never got around to correcting it. Further research into the issue showed that O'Leary had embellished his credentials going back to 1980 when he was hired by Syracuse as an assistant. O'Leary resigned December 14th. After a short stint with the Minnesota Vikings as an assistant to Mike Tice, he returned to coach college football at Central Florida in 2004. He spent 12 seasons there, with his best year being 2013, guiding the Knights to a 12-1 record and a win over Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl. On this day, just 1 year ago, former Tennessee Titan Frank Wycheck died after falling and hitting his head in his Chattanooga home. Wycheck is mostly remembered for throwing the lateral to Kevin Dyson in the Music City Miracle. He played 11 seasons in the NFL as a tight end, starting out with Washington before going to Houston in his 3rd year. Wycheck was convinced he suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, from his playing days. After his football career ended, he spent some time in the broadcast booth for the Titans radio network, but left in 2017 due to lingering effects of his head injuries. He planned to donate his brain for CTE research after his death. He just didn't think it would come so soon. When Wycheck died 1 year ago today, he was 52 years old. And on this day in 1935, University of Chicago running back Jay Berwanger won the first Heisman Trophy. And like a lot of guys back then, he played both offense and defense. In the 1935 season, he rushed for 577 yards, passed for another 405, amassed 359 yards in kick returns, scored 6 touchdowns, and kicked 5 PATs. Maybe more impressive, though, is that of 107 players surveyed who had played against Berwanger in 1935, 104 of them said that he was the best halfback they'd ever played against or seen. Berwanger would also become the first player ever drafted to play in the NFL when the Philadelphia Eagles picked him first in February 1936. And time now for today's Nothing to Do with Sports Fun Fact. If you remember the Diet Dr. Pepper commercials with the miniaturized singer named Lil Sweet and thought, that guy looks familiar, well, you may remember him as Justin Guarini from Season 1 of American Idol, when he finished as the runner-up to Kelly Clarkson. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.